Andy Edwards seems to think that, you know, you can't be playing if you're learning Thelonious Monk in college. That's useless. If you're trying to play in that style, you know, with your own expression, that's worthless. And this is the idiocy, really. I call this idiocy because how else is jazz going to survive if people aren't playing this stuff live? The genius of Thelonious Monk, the genius of Sonny Stitt, which of course Andy Edwards doesn't think is any good anyway because he's like Charlie Parker. So you see, that's another thing Andy Edwards doesn't get. He has no clue as to what jazz education. He has no clue of actually what self-education involves. Andy Edwards has no clue as to what it means to keep jazz alive.
Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Maybe Andy Edwards listens to this and goes, oh, I've heard this all before. You know, I've heard this on, Sonny Stitt's record. I heard this on, it's all been done before. Guess what, Andy? Sonny Stitt's dead. They're dead. John Coltrane's dead. Dead.
Hello, Mom, it's me. Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, sort of. Well, some of the YouTube people are picking on me again. Well, this time it's like they're saying that I'm stupid or idiotic, or well, they didn't say stupid. They said I was idiotic, though. They said I didn't know anything about teaching and education, and they said just like I really didn't know anything about jazz, and I thought that was all the stuff I did know about. Yeah. I know. I know I shouldn't listen to her, Mum. Just ignore him, yeah. No. You know, it's an old bloke. It's not anyone I couldn't have in a fight or anything like that. I'm pretty sure. But the thing is, he's in America anyway. I don't know his name. No. Nah, he hasn't got a YouTube as big as mine. Nowhere near now. I know, I don't know why I'm bothering. I know, Mum, you're right. Okay then. So do you think that's what I should do? Just attempt to fuck off? Okay, Mom. Oh, well, I'll consider that. I'm wrong. I'm wrong about jazz. And on this video, by this bloke, I can't remember his name, and I'm not going to remember his name. He's been on my channel before. He has. I've interviewed him.
Someone could clearly say Sonny Stitt was doing nothing but copying Charlie Parker. Okay,
but he was. So, that's all he was doing.
And so therefore, you know, during that period of time of hard bop, jazz is dead because you know what? All they're doing is ripping off Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And it's not true. They've made their own variations.
Well, I got to push back on that.
All right, well,
because in the 1950s, Charlie Mingus wrote a composition that I cannot. It's got such a long time. I could never say the actual. Because Charlie Mingus understood what jazz was, and he could push back in the 1950s. And when he did, everyone once said, well, what's Mingus up to? Because Mingus was an innovator. You try pushing against jazz now and see what happens in any shape or form. Because I've been, and you know, on my thing, I get comments all day long. I get insults. I've had all sorts of threats against me, like serious threats, because I've dared to push back against this. You know, someone alerted me to a group that was really just calling me all sorts of names and saying I was an idiot and I'm just doing clickbait because I had made the point of describing how the British jazz scene actually works.
And this is the idiocy. And this is the idiocy.
To call me names, I've got no problem with anybody disagreeing with my opinions on jazz. I've got no problem at all, but to be said that I don't know anything about education, that I'm idiotic, that I can't be quite that bright, you know, that I'm insular, to say all these things, right, is evidence that this guy has got annoyed. And so over this video, you can see he's boiled over. And what's his argument? His argument is that jazz musicians, certain ones, are dead.
They're dead. John Coltrane's dead. Dead. Coltrane's dead. You're not going to see him live. Louis Armstrong, dead. You're not going to see him live. Miles Davis, dead. Can't go see John Coltrane, can you? He's dead. Guess what, Andy? Sonny Stitt's dead. We're not going to see Sonny Stitt live.
I was going to have a sit down and listen to some jazz this afternoon, but there's a real problem, you see, because I pulled some records out to play. So I got Thelonious Monk here, Thelonious Monk. But the trouble is, he's dead! And I like a bit of the modern jazz quartet, but the problem is they're all dead! Louis Armstrong, one of my favourites. Oh, I love Louis Armstrong, but it doesn't matter because he's dead! Oh, I love a little bit of George Formby, but don't listen to him, he's dead. Who we got here? Oh, bit of the old Errol Garner. Love a bit of him, but he's dead. And how about some Miles Davis? You know, the thing is Miles Davis is dead. And if you're worried about the British jazz world, you know, we got some players, I like the American ones, but you know, I might put a bit of Chris Barber on, but the trouble with Chris Barber is he's dead. He's dead, they're all dead. Dead. And I'll say that word again with the same sort of, you know, emphasis, because of course it proves my argument wrong to say the word dead like this. Dead. Louis Armstrong is dead. So these are all dead, are they? Well, it's terrible, isn't it? Because I want to go and listen to it live, and I can't, because I made all these statements and killed jazz. And so all the players that play like Louis Armstrong, right, but don't innovate because they play it like Louis Armstrong for people who want to hear it, right, they can't do it anymore because Andy came along and ruined jazz. So all we have are these musicians, and the problem with them is they're all dead. Oh, he's annoyed me, this bloke has. I am banging my head up against the brick wall of jazz's self-destruction. Well, I am going to answer specifically the things he's had to say on this video. I'm going to do it specifically. But before we do that, I just want to set the record straight, okay? I just want to set the record straight. I love jazz. I've listened to jazz since I was a tiny child, right? I'm a musician and I'm a drummer. I also play a little bit of guitar. I've worked as a jazz drummer and played in jazz groups, all sorts of gigs. I probably in my time done 300 or 400, 500 jazz gigs. I played all sorts of different types of jazz. As a guitar player, I am not in the same level or league as I am as a drummer. But for the past 30 years, every night I sit down and I run through jazz standards and I study all the rigorous methodologies that goes with all the different types of jazz. That would be, you know, swing jazz. I don't go back to New Orleans jazz. I've tried it a little bit. It's hard. But I do like swing jazz. I go in to try and do some bebop. I try and do some modal jazz, some free jazz, and even some funky jazz and a bit of blues, right? So what I'm going to show you now is a video of me practicing through Stella by Starlight, which is a standard that the changes are quite dense in that, and I have difficulty with it. And I'm going to show you what I do every single day. Right, here it is, warts and all. you do that, I hear you ask? Why do you do it if you don't respect all this tradition? Because this bloke doesn't understand what I'm saying. That's the problem. He doesn't understand my point, right? Because there is a dearth of the intellectual understanding of creativity within the music world. It's in every single genre. I was originally a painter, and in painting you're expected to look at the work you do and put it under the microscope of whether it's creative or not. Music becomes workmanlike. People leech onto it. They have their little area that they've got and they want to protect it. Whether it's out there playing jazz, or they play jazz records on the radio, or they've got a YouTube where they talk about jazz albums, and they don't like me coming along and poo-pooing it. And that's it. All they hear is that Andy's poo-pooing it, right? Where they don't understand intellectually what I am saying, right? I'm going to state it now before we get into this. All those players are great, but they're all dead. And when you've got musicians that great, like Beethoven or Mozart, they're so great that in the future, after they've died, people will play their music. And when they play that music, they will play it in a way which is correct, in that they will give it some respect, and they will go, you can't play that note, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. It has to be done like this, right? Mozart wasn't played on synthesizers, it was played on these instruments, so they played it in this way. Now, what these people do is they, in terms of what this guy is thinking, and I'm not going to use his name because I can't remember it. It's something weird, Bellasomini, I can't say it all, and I can't be asked to learn it because I'm so annoyed. I'm annoyed at having to put up with this stupidness. It's, for me, I'm annoyed at the disrespect that we've actually spoken. We're completely civil, and then he comes out and starts calling me names. So this is why I'm hitting hard back now, right? This is the attitude that I'm criticising in the jazz world. Here it is. I've done so much on this channel about it. So let's really put it on the microscope and show what this really is, right? It's anti-intellectual. It doesn't understand the creative aspect of jazz. So you can sit there and go, Mozart didn't do that. Mozart wouldn't have been like that. But the thing is, if you could go back to the time and watch Mozart play his own stuff, you would suddenly realise he's actually a virtuoso pianist and composer. He would be doing things and working in a way which is completely different to the museum piece approach to classical music that we had. Now the reason is because Mozart has done his thing and it's closed off. It's dead. There's no creativity there. If you come along and try and change Beethoven in a way that is creative, you will be bringing it back to life, and it will be that music will now be in the real world doing something new. But the gatekeepers will go, you should not do that. Now, my point is, in me saying, yeah, you should, do whatever you want with Beethoven, doesn't matter. Break the rules, upset them. Now, if there was nobody to upset, they wouldn't be getting upset, would they? And this guy wouldn't be angry and calling me names. And that is my point about how annoyed he is, because he sees it as heretical, because he sees that to keep jazz alive, he has to keep it dead. People have to play it in a certain way. The saxophonist he kept going on, who's a great saxophone player, I went and watched him play on a load of videos and I enjoyed what he was doing and I would like to see him live. But is it entirely derivative? Yes. And when you see interviews with what he's saying, even though he's a virtuoso jazz musician, do I find a fault with what he's saying? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what we have is a system that has taken musicians and made them think that if you don't play that note, or you play that note, or you approach in this way, or you approach it in that way, that is not respectful through the form. And the form has to be played like this to respect the form, right? Now, these musicians are great and they're brilliant, and they are like classical musicians, and they are there. And he's totally right. Go, if you want to see someone playing like Coltrane, you can't. So go and see this Eric Alexander, because he plays like him, but you've just got to take out all the avant-garde, all the dangerous bits, all the free jazz bits, because he doesn't go that far, because he's sat within a certain remit of what he's doing. He looks back at a certain amount of time and he exists in that time period, right? And that is what he does. And I'm sure they dress a certain way and they play acoustic instruments and they'll act a certain way on stage. I think that's great. I could go to one of those gigs and watch it and I would love it, because I love jazz. I love all these jazzes that have been put into the museum. I love the museum piece, and I'm an old bloke and I have a tendency to want that. I don't want my apple cart upset, right? I want it to be safe. I want it to be nice, and I want someone to sound like the Brecker Brothers, or I want them to sound like John Coltrane. That is actually what I want, right? I don't want it to be messed about, same as this bloke. But what will that do to jazz? What it will do is it will turn jazz into a classical piece, like a museum piece, right? The only people who play it will be the elites. It will become the music of the elites. If you want to study it, you'll have to go to college, and the college will teach you it in a certain way. There will be no talk of creativity or doing anything new. It will be explanations of how it was done in the past, and you will have to drill your way through. Now, this is absolutely the case. Then once you leave, there will be no work for you, because that work will be flooded, because the colleges have just become a machine that uses the eliteness of jazz to make money from. Okay, so these kids who are probably from a well-off background will then come out, and they will be able to play jazz because they won't be expected to feed their family out of what they're doing. So it goes up its own arse of eliteness. So they're all playing to each other now. They're all doing their thing, right? And everyone's happy, and they brought their albums out. The albums don't make enough to make money. I've been in bands, I've had deals. I know how much albums you have to sell to make money. These guys aren't. This is vanity. It's eliteness. Doesn't mean the music's bad. It doesn't mean that at all. But that's what we've got going on. And when you sit and talk to these guys, of which there are millions all over the planet now, because of the education system, the college is just turning out jazz virtuosos, turning out. And I've dealt with them. And some of them, when they're in their 20s, you sit and talk to them and you say, what do you see your future as being? Oh, I don't know, because I'm still having to work, or I'm still having to take gigs for 50 quid. There's no way of making a proper career out of this, is there? No. So what do I do, Andy? Well, nobody wants to listen to me, but I have the answers. I have the answers to this, and I know where it should go, because I'm 57 years old, and because I worked in colleges at university level for 30 years. I taught cultural studies, music history, and I taught jazz. And I thought about it greatly and at depth. So when this guy turns around and says, I haven't, and I don't know about it, right? I do. Now, I've just shown you me playing Stella by Starlight. Now, my anxiety of putting that up is, if somebody watches it, they'll be quite aware that I am not like a student staring at the chords and just playing through it. I've got my eyes shut. I'm playing to that standard. That's proof that I've assimilated that standard over decades. My note choice, however, might not be that attractive to a certain jazz mindset. The way I play, my picking and my tone might not be what they're thinking, yeah, well, hey, Andy's not hitting the right notes, and sometimes he's not doing that the right way. And I have hit that with my jazz guitar playing so often from the certain world of jazz. I don't so much with the drums, because I got more chops and I can actually emulate Roy Haynes or whatever they think jazz drumming should be. But creatively, is that what I'm trying to do when I sit down and play the guitar? No, I'm trying to take that jazz standard and I'm trying to find my own voice. I don't want to sound like Pat Metheny. I don't want to sound like Wes Montgomery. I don't want to sound like Charlie Christian. I don't want to sound like Pat Martino. And although I've listened to all those guys and learned from them, I'm trying to find my own voice. And then I will put that out there, and I'm sure there's some people who watch this video went, oh, I liked Andy's guitar playing then, because I was actually trying to put some interest in there. I was trying to take it to places where he went, oh, that was weird. He seems like that's how I love to play. He's on the edge. He's following the chord progression now, but he's not now. What's he doing? Where's that? I'm trying to do that. Right? And I did think, should I just bring the chords in and drop it down and saw my way through the chords, which I can do. But for me, that wouldn't be creative. I'm 57 years old. I want to do my own thing, right? The kid who wants to play and sound like Wes Montgomery, I'm all for him, but I don't want to do that. But when you try and do that, what happens? You come up against these gatekeepers. And you think, well, I thought I was playing jazz. No, you're not playing jazz now. And I've had it all my life. I've had very angry jazz musicians come to me and go, well, you don't play jazz. So I send them a video, and then they go, that's not jazz? You think that's jazz drumming, do you? And I feel like going, yeah, because jazz is about freedom, and it's about me doing what I want to do, not having some gatekeeper standing over it going, that is not how it should be played. That is what I object to, not the crap that this bloke has talked about in this video, because he doesn't understand. Jazz will become a museum piece. It will become more and more elitist. It will be funded by the elites, and it will be for the elites, and they will all love it. And he will review those albums, because it pretty much is that now. He will review those albums, and the players will be great, and he will say they're great. But someone who actually wants to say something creative, it will be a place you don't go. No creative person goes to the world of Mozart to try and be creative. They can be a great musician and they can play that music and people can enjoy it, but it's not the same as being creative. Creativity is the machine that drives humanity forward, and creativity is at once profound and looks to the future so it can exist in the future, which is what Beethoven did by turning up the, going against the past, right? It at once does that, but it also works in the context. Jazz, every aspect of jazz was important because of the context it was in. And most of the time the musicians were outsiders, they're outside of music. Now it's inside of music. Once jazz becomes inside of music, it doesn't have what it originally had, right? It doesn't mean it can't have it, but it won't have it while you've got gatekeepers, while you've got people treating it like a classical music form, while all this money is hooked up in the education and the elites, and it's just the elites clapping themselves and patting themselves on their back, because young Johnny, who doesn't need to work, can go around calling himself a jazz musician. Right, that's the reality of it. Now, politically, this goes even more deeper, and I've tried to get in it. Funding it, it goes this guy does not know about it. He says, I don't understand it, but he hasn't gone into the depth. I have studied the beginnings of jazz, early jazz, how jazz formed. I've gone through every bit of the history of jazz with a fine-tooth comb, right? I have studied it inside and out, and I have a great respect for it, right? But let's reiterate. You can play old jazz, you can sound like Thelonious Monk, those people should be out there. I'm not saying they should be banned, but doing things that will stop it from still being alive, because I think it's dead. My point on the last video is let's just not bother with it. These guys are so angry and the gatekeepers are so strong. And all these young students that message me and say, I went to jazz college and I turned up and they didn't like my guitar. Why, did you have a solid body guitar? Yeah, because they won't like a solid body guitar. If it's painted, even worse. Don't take a chorus pedal in because they won't like that. Don't play any blues or bends. Don't like rock music. Don't like any of the music that you liked before, because you've got to disconnect yourself like that and show absolute supplication, respect for this bloody idiotic elitist form of music that used to be about freedom and expressing yourself and finding your own voice, that having your own voice was essential, and that every musician that they're aping was completely unlike the guys that are now trying to ape them, because they're trying to ape somebody that wasn't trying to ape anybody. Right, that is this bit done. I'm going to really go into depth here because I've done so many videos on this, and I'm shouting my point out here, and yet people like this, who are the gatekeepers, are going, I'm really angry, and he's an idiot. If he doesn't like this, Thelonious Monk is dead. This is dead. Now let's look at his actual points. Now it's a long video. I don't want to react to all of them, but I will try and pull out the salient points, of which there's not that much there.
Andy Edwards seems to think that, you can't be playing, if you're learning Thelonious Monk in college, that's useless. If you're trying to play in that style, with your own expression, that's worthless. And this is the idiocy, really. I call this idiocy because how else is jazz going to survive if people aren't playing this stuff live?
So he says he's talking directly to me. He says I'm idiotic, right? There's no reason to do that. Why is he calling me idiotic? Why is he trying to diminish what I'm saying by trying to make out that I'm lesser as a person, that I'm not educated enough, that I don't know enough about it? Why is he trying to do that, right? As well as putting forth his argument. Now, his argument is this, is to keep jazz alive, for jazz to be played, musicians need to study how to play like Thelonious Monk, because if somebody wants to hear someone sounding like Thelonious Monk now, live, they need to go to someone who plays like that, okay? And if you haven't got that, then the music, which is a live form, doesn't happen. Now, let me state, if somebody said to me, there's a pianist playing locally, he's really influenced by Thelonious Monk, do you want to go? I would go and I would love it. And if I liked the music he was playing, and I liked his take on Thelonious Monk, I would buy his album. And I have never said anything on here against that. All right? But what I have stated is something more subtler, is that bloke is not Thelonious Monk, right? If he's been influenced by Thelonious Monk and then he's found his own voice in it, he has his own voice, right? which is influenced by Thelonious Monk, it has to be that. Even if someone is playing the licks of Thelonious Monk, he's reordering those licks. In jazz, you can't be someone else. In classical music, you play Beethoven, you're playing Beethoven. But the way jazz is actually structured, as soon as you start playing like Thelonious Monk and you're influenced by it, it's not Thelonious Monk. You're seeing that guy, okay? Now, that is always going on to a certain extent. My point is that what's happening now is that if somebody comes out playing and they take that Thelonious Monk and they start to push it into certain areas, there is an elite that comes along and says, no, that's not right. That is my point. These people are fine doing it, but it's not those people I'm talking about. I'm on about the people that come in and want to take it somewhere else. And more importantly, young people coming to jazz. I doubt this guy has got anywhere near the experience of young people who love music and they're interested in jazz, that then go towards jazz and then the gatekeepers come along and say, no, you like rubbish music, you can't play, you've got the wrong guitar, you bent the string, you've got chorus, and most importantly, you've got to understand the language of jazz. You have to respect it. You've got to do the notes. You can't make it all up yourself. Well, the truth is this. If me, as a young musician, wants to sound like Thelonious Monk, I have to study the theory. If my ears are brilliant, I don't need the theory. These guys don't understand that. Brilliant musicians don't need the theory. But if you're not so good, you need the theory. And that will tell you how Thelonious Monk sounds. And then you'll know. Okay? But trying to find your own voice, there's no theory for that. When I interviewed Narada Michael Walden, who is an incredible player that was actually at the pointy end of music back in 1974 when he joined the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and John McLaughlin was taking him through these new ideas. And I said to Narada Michael Walden, did you have charts? You know, what happened? Did John bring what happened? And he said, Andy, there ain't no charts at that level. I'm talking about that aspect of music. And the guys that would agree with me would be the Thelonious Monks, would be the John McLaughlins, would be the Bill Evans. They would agree with me, right? And these musicians on the whole, if they heard someone aping them, they would hate it. Now, I can go and get all the proof for that. Or you guys in the comments that know I'm correct because you know about it will say they hated it. You know, why are you trying to copy Charlie Parker? There were guys doing it as well, because jazz isn't what has been made out by the elites, this wonderful thing which is like coming from the word of God. People disagreed. They had different opinions, and the music was there to actually fight. And you be friends. You don't call people names, right? Unless you've turned it into some sort of heretical religion.
And when Andy Edwards, we're going to go back to him because he talks about how self-taught is the greatest. We don't need anybody, all these jazz schools, they're terrible, all this kind of crap. And it's not true. There are some really good jazz schools out there that are teaching they're teaching the fundamentals of jazz. And it's important to understand that, even if you're going to go out and do something completely different, avant-garde, free jazz, or whatever it is you're going to try to come up with that you think is new.
I am entirely self-taught. Now, no one is entirely self-taught because you get information from all over the place. You learn from all sorts of different things. And it might be just a mate saying, oh, you want to try that? There you're being taught. So it's very silly to say, you know, I'm self-taught. But what I mean by that is I didn't go through an establishment. I didn't go through an academy. I never went through a formal training. I never got taught the rules in a certain way. I had to find them out myself, right? But at the age of 22, I went into education. And I could see my strength was I was self-taught, but I'd been able to amass a reasonable amount of knowledge and chops and technique through the self-taught route. So being in a college where you had guys that were classically trained, they got master's degrees, doctorates in music, they were classical, ridiculous, especially in the early days. I mean, the standards dropped down in education now, but that's another argument. But in the early days, the guys I were with were just insane, played on albums, played with famous people, but also had degrees in music, you know, ridiculous, studied electronic music, ridiculous players. And I saw that my strength, and they told me this, my strength was that I was more like the kids. I was a rocker. These guys were too old to be rockers. They come through a different route. Even though they've been involved in early rock and roll, they come through a different route. Whereas I was a rocker and I got into music because of heavy metal. I understood that route. I taught for 30 years and I taught jazz. Now, this guy's saying, I've got no respect for it. I don't think people should be formally taught, blah, blah, blah. He's saying all this about me. And that's the conclusion he's come from. And I'm sure he's going to watch this video. Well, he'll go, well, why did I come to that conclusion? Well, there's 1,500 videos on here. Either I've been saying the wrong thing all along, or you have the blinkers on because you are gatekeeping. You are not listening. You're gatekeeping. You are trying to protect what is yours. Your little world of jazz that you've carved out for yourself. The whole industry is full of these guys. Right, so I went and got in touch with one of my students. This is a guy that I taught jazz with, as well as a whole bunch of other subjects. He then left. He went past up to degree level. He's now in the industry and he's working, and you've seen him on the channel before. So I'm now going to have an interview with Will. Just describe what I taught you and what you did when I was your teacher.
Okay, so Andy's kind of approach to teaching wasn't one of ticking boxes and kind of filling out essays. It was practical information and practical knowledge that you'd take out on the road and gig with. There was a jazz unit where we had to, I think originally it was write an essay about jazz, but you made the argument, well, if you can play through the changes, then you can have an understanding of jazz. You gave, you put us into groups, you gave us all a chart, and you gave me and Lewis Follow Your Heart by John McLaughlin, which was in 11/8, and I was sweating. We'd have interval training lessons where you'd basically teach us the foundations of music, because what I feel has been instilled in me is this idea of, you know, when I started teaching guitar and bass and things, a few of my other guitar teachers would just very much parrot teach. They'll teach you like, just play what I'm playing, and not teach them how each individual part works. So they'd get you really good at saying a sentence, but they won't teach you what the words mean. But at college, it was very much, you need to know what the words mean. So then when you go into a situation where the sentence might be changed, but there'll be certain words that you recognise and go, right, I know what's going on here. So when we like pull a chart up, especially when I do like my musical theatre stuff, now I don't panic. You know, if someone says, oh, it's a minor 7 flat 5 with a absurd, you know, hieroglyphics, I know what the building blocks are to be able to process what that chord is and what the chord tones will be.
And were you taught that by me in the class?
You were indeed. Andy did teach me the chords and the notes in the chords. Anytime we would be sat in like a lecture room and someone would bring up Snarky Puppy or Jacob Collier or anything like this, you would immediately be able to tell us the history of where that artist, their influences come from. So it's kind of like we not understand, but these ideas of geniuses or greatness, everyone comes from somewhere. Everyone stands on the shoulders of giants. So it was very quickly, you know, we would sit there and go, oh, Polyphia or Jacob Collier was like, these are insane musicians. But it'd be like, well, the reason why they're there is because of this. And it's kind of like the building blocks into what the artist would be. Well, when you sent me the video, I watched it twice, because the first time I watched it was a very emotional response to the points he was making. And I feel I took away two things from the video. Is one, this idea of keeping jazz alive. I feel like what he actually wants is a cover band of jazz. He wants jazz to become like a wedding band or a cover band, where you would go see like Sex on Fire or, you know, Mr. Brightside. And this idea of keeping jazz alive is replicating what has been done. So when he says, oh, I want to go see a Thelonious Monk tune live.
Because what is Thelonious Monk?
He's dead. He's dead. And you
He's
can't
dead.
see him. He's dead. He's a
He's
dead man.
dead.
But the point he was making of, I want to go into a jazz club and see someone play a Thelonious Monk tune, but do it their way. It just, for me, it's like I can understand appreciation of the what has happened, but you'd be treating jazz almost like classical music in a sense. It's like you've got to do it how they did it.
It's not something you fall off out of the bed knowing how to do. It takes effort, takes dedication to do it well. And there's a lot of people that are playing very good, that are very talented and very musical.
This I find insulting in a way. I don't think I'm the greatest player in the world, but I've played on a few albums. I've done hundreds of jazz gigs. I've done hundreds of fusion gigs. I've played progressive rock. I play all the instruments, and I can probably get through, a jazz standard playing on all the instruments. I'm not saying I'm the greatest in the world, but the idea that he thinks I have no respect for people putting the work in means, has he seen me play, or does he think I am a bad player? Now, this is where we come up with against something. When I was working, the reason why I didn't go into the world of jazz was because you would meet someone, and if you had a disagreement with them creatively or a disagree about something else, these guys would go in and go, well, Andy's, he's okay, but he's not really a proper jazz player. And this idea was proper jazz playing would come in, and that would be used as a weapon. And I had that happen many years ago, where I'd got a great gig, and this one guy decided to go for me after a couple of rehearsals, and I'm not too sure what I said or what I did, but he went behind my back, went to the guy who's putting the group together, went, don't get Andy in, he can't play jazz. And when I found this out, now the reason I found it out, because he passed it on to another guy who was my student, and my student came to me and says, he said that Andy you can't play him, and he's got me in instead, and I was teaching him, so he had some respect for me. He didn't understand it, so he told me, and I knew exactly what he'd said, and I know what it was that he was pulling me up on, and what it was his version of jazz, his version of what's good jazz, and his version of what isn't good jazz. And this happens over and over again. I would send students off to music colleges, and they would prepare like Jaco Pastorius pieces. They would go in and play a Jaco Pastorius piece. They put the work in to have, and this is honestly true, to have the teacher turn around to them and going, we don't do that riff-based shit here. Arrogant twat. Really? And to do that to a kid. Now, do you want me to fill a video up of these stories? Right? I've got hundreds of them involving famous players. I know organizations, jazz, agencies that have turned around and talked about stellar musicians who play jazz, but their faces don't fit. And they go, well, I think they're very rock and roll, aren't they? Or they're very loud. They're very loud, Would they pull an audience in? Would you think they'd really pull an audience in? Because, they spend a lot of their time doing pop sessions, don't they? Right? This goes on and on and on. So for this guy, this is all straw manning all the way through this video. Most of the things he puts against me, I don't believe. And if he goes, yeah, well, I didn't know that, Andy. I watched you play and you're so untechnical. And when I've watched your lessons on education and you go through scales and chords and explain it all, I thought that you'd got it so wrong that you'd never put any work into music. You'd never done any practice. And when you've done all these videos when you explained that you used to do 6 hours drums and 4 hours guitar every single day, I just thought you were lying. Right? This guy's ignorant. He's ignorant in the real. He ignores the facts to fit what he wants.
But Ornette Coleman didn't just walk into a jam session and just jack the whole thing up, walk up there and just start, you guys don't know what you're playing. I can play this tune way better, and start playing some freaking crazy stuff on his instrument that he can barely play. And he wasn't like that. Ornette Coleman understood that tradition, honored that tradition, and then went and expanded and did his own thing with it.
That's not true. Why does he not know that? Because he doesn't know his jazz history like me. Okay, so let's see what the truth is. So he had this new way of playing. He went to sessions, they didn't like it, and they kicked him out. But in terms of the Ornette Coleman story, he's just got it wrong. And the story he's picked up has proved my point. It's proven. Is it proven? Proven or proven? It's proven or proven or proved. It's one of those. But it's proven my point. Not he's arguing against himself. Now I can take the whole lot of this apart if I need to. Shall I carry on?
Ornette Coleman understood that tradition, honored that tradition, and then went and expanded and did his own thing with it. And see, that's what Andy Edwards doesn't understand. He does not understand it. He'll give lip service to all this stuff and talk about these great jazz musicians and the pioneers, but he doesn't really get them because he doesn't understand the tradition of jazz. He doesn't get it. He hates tradition. And that's what's so ironic is he hails these great jazz pioneers, but he doesn't get that they were lovers of tradition.
I don't get the tradition, you see, because what these musicians did is that they took the tradition and then they took it and they changed it. But they learned the tradition first, didn't they? So what's the tradition? The tradition is this: New Orleans frontline jazz. That goes into sort of Chicago style. Then it goes into swing, Kansas City style jazz, bebop. Bebop goes into cool jazz and goes into hard bop. We then get free jazz. And then after free jazz, we get jazz rock fusion, we get rock music, we get prog, we get electric blues, we get avant-garde noise, we get punk, we get hip hop, we get electronica, we get all these things. And when you look at the history of jazz, if you just want to take, say, hip hop, rap emerges out of jazz with the last boats of the 1960s. So we can look at a history of jazz in terms of recorded music, which is just over 100 years old, and see that more than half of that, the tradition has been rap and hip hop. So why aren't they teaching that in the colleges? Oh, that's not a part of jazz. Oh, so you've just gatekeeped. You know, even though it came out in jazz, and even though loads of jazz musicians have rappers, and even though the approach is very, very similar, and it's come from the same place, it's come from the tradition, you're now slicing that off and sending it on its way. Heavy metal you're not going to have. Electric guitars. And then suddenly these kids are turning up who play in the tradition, but their tradition, and they're told, why have you brought a chorus pedal with you? And why have you got a solid body? What's that wiggly thing on your guitar? That's a tremolo arm. Oh, well, you know, go and get yourself a hollow body. You got to pretend it's 1962. That's where the tradition stopped. It's not that I'm against tradition. What I'm against is the fact that they are ignoring certain traditions and they are dissecting jazz and going, that's not jazz, that's not jazz. They're gatekeepers.
Andy Edwards has no clue as to what it means to keep jazz alive. He has no clue as to what jazz education, how important it is. He has no clue of actually what self-education involves, because we're all self-educated to a point. Even if you go to a college, you still have to digest the material they're giving you. You still have to play with your peers. You see, that's another thing Andy Edwards doesn't get. He thinks this is that jazz is just individualistic. I am the greatest. I am the most creative, and they just do it themselves, like there's some kind of oracles that have come down, beamed down from the heavens.
There is a part of me that doesn't want to even bother answering whether I know about education or not. I must have had my eyes pretty closed for those 30 years when I was in education, but that's not the point here, right? There is something absolutely ridiculous when he says that I don't understand how jazz is about musicians working with other musicians and their peers and all that type of stuff. Because I have done video after video explaining that the structure of jazz is democratic, unlike classical music, which is dictatorial. In that jazz operates in a way where people who don't know each other from different backgrounds can come together. And if they understand the language and tradition, they can play with each other. But within that framework of play with each other, they can also make an individual statement. And in that respect, it's very much like the American way. It's very much like democracy. And it can be seen as a statement by black people in America to state, look, you've got this democracy, this is how it should work, but we're not getting it. So it has that political dimension. I have said that over and over again. And I have had people come back with the correct pushback because things are always nuanced. And they've pushed back and said, Andy, that's not true, right? Because jazz musicians can be dictatorial. They can demand you play in a certain way. They don't expect their peers to do something. They tell their peers what to do. They pay them and make them do things, and they manipulate them. Duke Ellington would, play one musician off against another musician. Miles Davis would put people in a place where they were confused. Jazz isn't all just about playing with your peers and being empathetic with them. It's much more complex than that. But that opinion, I don't agree with. I understand it, I can argue it, and I think there is a validity in that argument. But for me, jazz is about playing with your peers. That is what it is. It's a language, and you have to learn that language. You have to learn it. And I have taught that language, and I can play in that language to a certain extent, right? But for him to say that I don't understand it, it's this aspect of going, he doesn't understand it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to diminish him personally. I'm going to make it look like he's an idiot that doesn't understand education, doesn't understand jazz history, doesn't understand the theory, thinks things are absolutely wrong, has got some idea that, great jazz musicians just beamed down by some oracle. What does that mean? When I have created video after video explaining the lineage and how people are influenced on it and how that has worked, right? And so, at some points, champion new jazz, which I don't do very much. But when I have done it, been able to say, this is what I like about it, right? But there's something I really, really don't like about the contemporary jazz scene. It's the elitism and it's the pretense. It's the elitism and the pretense. That is what I'm trying to critique. And when you push it, people don't like it and they react like this. Because he's sat there with his own little world. The whole music industry is full of people like this. And they get there, they carve out their own little world. And that's their world. That's what makes them important, is that. And then somebody starts to come along and rock the boat. Now, the fact is, jazz will be dead in 10, 20 years. Whatever he's doing will be gone. It will just be gone because it cannot survive this elitist stage it's got into. But the spirit of jazz has already moved on and is elsewhere. Now, it would be nice for the jazz world to acknowledge that, but the education systems cannot do that and never will. All right? This guy does not understand what I'm saying. That's the overarching point. And I want you to ask yourselves why.
You see, that's another thing Andy Edwards doesn't get. He doesn't think that anybody has a right to express themselves in the mode of a Thelonious Monk. And there's some people that can play with better technique than Thelonious Monk played and play that similar style and sound just as good or better. And even write new tunes that kind of fall into his playing, that angular playing that he has, right? So this is all a bunch of garbage when it comes to whether jazz is alive, whether jazz is dead. Jazz is not ever going to die. It's going to go through its peaks and valleys. And it's going to stay alive because people want to hear it live. And I think that that's key. And I hope that we're going to see more live jazz. I think we are going to see more live jazz being played in more cities and more places.
So what happens is all the genius things, right, that have come from outside, come from rock and pop and things like that. When they come into jazz, right, the wall comes up, okay? And by the time these things get into jazz, it is jazz leeching off these new things. There's a million drummers now playing jazz and putting this fast 16th note drum and bass thing in. That drum and bass jungle thing happened 35 years ago. And they're doing it now and thinking that they're up to date for following something that happened years and years ago. You know why? Because the jazz college will never teach that. Certain jazz musicians, right, were in there. They were studying Jay Diller. They were, it's like they were musicians doing this. But so often, they never got classified as a jazz musician. I'll give you an example of this. Alan Holdsworth. Alan Holdsworth listens to Coltrane, he listens to Bill Evans, he's also listening to Ravel, but he's also listening to Eric Clapton. He takes all these influences and he takes the guitar and he takes the sort of sound of Coltrane, puts it onto the guitar, but then he takes it way past Coltrane, even past Coltrane, and he starts playing in this style. And back in the 1980s, the jazz world ignored him. And when they did talk about it, they said, oh, it's just virtuosity, it's just scales. There's no emotion there, there's nothing. He was like castigated into the netherworld of not being a jazz musician, to the point where there's an album where he's playing and then they go into the toilet and the guy goes, what are you playing? Jazz, I hate jazz. He knew that he didn't fit into that, and it killed him. Because the jazz world, there was no big music grants for him. There was nothing he could jump onto. There was no support for him, was there? Because it wasn't really jazz, was it? Now, every guy coming out of music college now, right, the influence more than anybody else is Alan Holdsworth. Does the jazz world even say that? No, they still don't acknowledge it. They acknowledge Alan Holdsworth, right? No one understands how snobby and snotty this is, and no one understands the effect it has. Alan Holdsworth had to live by touring and touring. They would turn up to venues and he would come out and he would say, look, you've got to buy some t-shirts, you've got to buy this, or we won't eat. We can't afford to do this. They were literally on the breadline the whole time. I've spoken to these guys. Why were they doing it? Because they truly were pioneering new jazz at that time. So the 1980s, Holdsworth was pioneering new jazz. It wasn't Wynton Marsalis or Branford Marsalis. It wasn't Courtney Pine or any of those guys. They had the mainstream. That was the beginning of the elitism. No, it was Alan Holdsworth, right? I've seen this up close. And now, if you're a musician and you're fired up by music and you're listening to all the music that kids listen to now, then you walk into jazz college, you literally have to drop that. Now, he's probably going to take a very shallow aspect and go, oh, so you think jazz education should be teaching all these things? No, I don't. What it needs is a change in the education, which is the change that's required intellectually. You need to have certain people come in who understand what I'm talking about. It needs to be an academic shift because it should stop being so prescriptive, right? It has to ask some very serious questions. If a student wants to study bebop and sound like a bebop player, that's great. I'll support them 100%, but it needs to come from them. And there will always be people who want to do that. That music won't be particularly creatively alive, but it needs to happen. He's right. We need to have people playing bebop. People want to go and see it. When I went to art college, I was really into Picasso and Braque, so I was painting like cubist stuff. And the lecturer looked at my work and he said, "Why are you doing this for?" And I said, "Because I love cubism." He goes, "Yeah, well, it's 100 years old. It's gone." And I said, "Can I paint it in that style?" And he went, "No." Why? Because this gone. You have to paint in the new style. You've got to do this, this, and this. And I thought, that's really odd. Can't I just paint what I want to paint? And the art salon college beat it out of me. It beat it out my love of what I love about visual. Music, I never went to music college. So I never had it beaten out of me. And then when I was head of a department, I was determined not to beat it out of the kids. My kids will tell you that I had a really serious standard and everyone had to respect jazz and listen to it and you have to understand the history. And when we went in, I said, you're going to become a good player by studying the tradition of jazz. But there's a certain point where it must stop. And it's in the expression of the musicians. There's a certain point where you go, look, they don't need to learn bebop. So you have to allow people to try and play bebop or play those tunes in a different way. And the guitar playing that I've offered up today, I have spent 4 years trying to do that myself. I don't know whether I'm doing it, but I know there's a whole bunch of jazz guys out there that will go, well, that's not proper jazz. I ain't listen to Andy. You know, it's ridiculous.
Even in a rock jam session, which I've been to several of them, open mic with a rock thing, you're not going to get up there and say, all right, guys, we're going to play a tune, and you name something, they have no idea what it is, and you start playing it, you're like, oh, looks like you guys don't know the song. Or you get up there and you name a song and then you freaking jack the whole thing up where it's not even recognizable. It's no longer the tune. So if you're going to go call a tune, let's say, Hey Joe, I'm going to go to an open mic. That's a great open mic jam, right? Hey Joe. Pretty simple. I'm going to go play Hey Joe, and then all of a sudden I'm just going to freaking play completely nothing that has to do with the tune. And everybody's going to sit there in the band and they're going to look at you like, what the F is this guy freaking playing? He's playing, he should be playing something probably in E, something that flows along with the changes of the song. And yet he's playing something in D flat.
wait for the jazz police. Jazz police. You know the truth? You can if you want. This is the gift that will keep on giving. I will make videos on this subject. The views will be amazing because half the world hates jazz and hates the snobbery and elitists. They like the music and they like the players, but they hate that elitism and they hate that snobbery. And there are literally hundreds of thousands of music students, ex-music students who have got into the system and come up exactly against what I'm describing. And they know it's right. And then the gatekeepers who have carved out their little empire in the world of jazz will find what I'm saying upsetting. And so they will react badly and they will get angry. And within that tension, I will be able to extract the very thing that makes YouTube work, which is the conflict between these things. I could endeavour, as I did with this guy, to have a nice conversation with him and try and engage with him in a kind way. But you will get paid back with insults and being told that you are stupid, basically, in no uncertain terms. And this is, 40 minutes of him saying that I'm stupid. There's very little, I feel, for me to argue against here. I feel I've argued against it. I think I've made my case. I'm now going to say it in conclusion. I love the tradition. I love all the styles of jazz. I think there should be people playing it. And I think that he should be out there providing entertainment for people who want to hear it. And I think people should be able to buy those albums. And when they buy those albums, they should love those albums and nobody should get in the way of that. And I hope they make some money. And I hope that there's an industry out there. But there isn't. And there is a problem with jazz, okay? It's because it's become elitist, it's gatekeepery, and it's lost the thing that it had. Now, this happens to all art forms, and I'm probably being naive to think that I can do anything about it. It is what it is. And this guy should have probably come on and said, Andy, jazz is not what it was. The time of Charlie Parker is not now. Now it is like the classical music of America, and we have the colleges and people play it, and then we go and see these young people play it, and we go, God, they sound really like, it sounds just like Beethoven, or it sounds just like Thelonious Monk, right? Now, I don't have a problem with anybody doing whatever they want to do, but when I come to listen to those guys doing it, I can hear it's not the same as Thelonious Monk, and there's no point in him saying, they're dead, right? It's like, once anyone's dead, no one can come along and replace it. Go in, they're dead. So that allows this other stuff to be there. When it sounds to me as though it lacks something. Now, the truth is, when I listen to a lot of modern jazz, all of it has something. All of it has something I love. And all of it has something that I'd rather listen to than what's in the charts or whatever anything else is, because I love jazz so much. I'm quite happy. I listen to Kenny G and love him, as I've said, because he's a great player. He's got a lovely tone. I could enjoy it, especially the Latin American album. I listened to it and I really enjoyed it. I could love all Eric Alexander and all the people I listened to. I thought they were great. Okay, but you can't tell me that when I listen to it, I can't go, yeah, but it lacks something that the music had in the past. And I might be wrong. It might be that the danger, the feeling that the horizons are open, the idea that you're going into an area that no one has gone before and explored that area, and you don't know where you're at, and you're not measuring against anything except the fact that you've been taken over by the spirit of exploration. The fact that I don't hear that, right, in the music, that it sounds like licks that we used to teach at college, just been strung together. The fact that I hear that and I go, in the same way as when Alan Holdsworth heard someone copying him, he went, why the hell's he doing that for? It's disgusting. Why do they have to do it? That's his reaction. That's my reaction when I hear the same licks over and over again, the same tired old licks. Then you put on top of that the fact that I saw 1 million students totally demoralised by it, a load of students feeling it wasn't for them, a load of students realised that the only way that they could survive in this was to be loaded, to have family with a ton of money, to have a certain cool look about them, to be attractive, and to have a level of virtuosity, because all it was about was the virtuosity. And that, for a kid that goes, I love jazz, I want to express myself in it, but where's the place for me? There isn't one, mate, And so And then to see the mediocre ones that have all that except the ability and the chops, they're there as well. Believe me, the super trendy ones sitting there playing, it's all cool, isn't it? And they're all really, you know, and they're who's paying for it? You know, how can they do it? Right? As everyone says, the problem is in the colleges. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if you didn't have to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds to get that education. There's the rub, right? The reason why YouTubers like Marvin are getting such a following, coming out and exposing what Berkeley are doing and other music colleges are doing, and then I come out as a music educator that's been in it for 30 years, and I agree with the Marvins and don't agree with the establishment from where I come, is a testament to there's something going on there, and people feel that. They feel that, and there's so much there to discuss. But this guy doesn't want to discuss it. He wants to not listen to it, get the wrong end of the stick, straw man me, and then insult me. This video is an attempt to try and undermine my authority to talk on this. That's what this is about. That's why there's not that much substance there. But there's a lot of saying Andy doesn't get this. The trouble with Andy is he's in a world where he's blind to this and he's blind to that and he's blind to that. And he never takes anything I've actually said, the statement itself like I have here, and puts an answer on it. All right? But this guy is an example of the attitude that gatekeeps jazz. And he's an example of the late stage failure as jazz as a creative music form. It'll survive. It'll survive a couple of decades. People will be playing it. But the thing is that it's not Beethoven and it's not Mozart. It will get cast aside. And that's the honest truth. Maybe Winter Marsalis can shore up something that really is like the equivalent of the National Opera here in the UK. And just receives millions of pounds and just exists there so they can go, see, America, we do have an artistic cultural form that's equal to Europe, and that maybe the powers that be will be happy to shovel millions in to have that there, perhaps. I myself, I can't play within that straitjacket. I can't express myself within it. I know I've put my arse on the line putting that video out of me playing Over Stella by Starlight. I know, because I understand the language. I could have tried harder to hit the language that they want. I do know what's there, right? I could have tried harder to play in a less scruffy way. I could have tried harder to not be me. Hopefully someone there that knows their stuff will go, Andy's actually playing quite interesting through the change, because I know there's going to be jazz guys go, look at Andy, look how he played through Stella by Starlight. Where's the licks? He hasn't studied the licks. I haven't. Not in that way. I haven't. So what does that mean? What are you saying to me? I played jazz on drums and I can play that till the cows come home. But I've had the same thing said about my jazz drumming as well. I know what they feel like, I tell you. Open up the doors. Open up the windows. Let the world in. Let people take your form of music and do what they want with it. And stop saying, oh, they're quite good, but it's not jazz. It's not jazz. I know what jazz is. It's not jazz. That guy on this video never dealt with that. All he go into is that this is jazz. This is jazz. This is a bloke got an album out. This is another bloke that's got an album out. They've got an album out. And there's some albums out, because that's what he does. That's his thing. He brings albums out and goes, this is a great. But the thing is that when he's saying a jazz album is great, do you really trust his ability to artistically know that this is great? Or does it just conform to what he thinks jazz should be in a very competent way? So he said, this is a great album. Does he really know what good is? And of course, the answer to that is unanswerable. And of course, the one person who has spent 1,500 videos trying to answer it has been me. And I haven't been able to yet. What we used to do, this is what Andy would say. Oh, that's...
Hi, my name is William, and this is my police interview.
So, Mr. Ullman, you were travelling westwards on the A456, and you saw that young lady loitering at the side of the thing, and you decided to pull over. Then what happened?
I was asking for directions. That's all I was doing, officer, I swear. But jazz is dead. Like, what he's referring to is kind of like a dead area of history. Doesn't mean you can't appreciate it. Mozart's dead, yeah, but we very much still like Mozart, and we still very much like his music.
Who else is dead, Will? Because I think, he had a good go, but I was thinking there's Henry VIII.
Yeah,
there's Cleopatra.
They shouldn't have the Scottish play. Stop the Scottish play. What they're doing, putting that on the stage, stop all that stuff. He's dead. Shakespeare's dead.
They're all dead, aren't they? My dad's dead.
Yep.
And I've got a number of cats that are dead. Tiffy's dead, Sophie's dead. We had a cat called Black because my mum and dad were very imaginative with that one.
Right.
But she's dead anyway. Who else is there? Grey. We had another cat called Grey, and she's dead.
Do you like cats though, Andy?
I like cats, yeah.
So you can still appreciate cats, but you recognise that some cats are dead, and therefore they should probably not be replicated or manufactured, brought back to life, Frankenstein back in.
I said to my mom, I said, Sophie's dead. And just like he did, I went, Sophie, she's dead. And my mom said, don't worry, we'll get another cat. And I said, but it won't be the same, it will be a different cat. We need a cat that will respect the tradition of Sophie as the cat.
Yeah.
And I said, can't I get another cat and then skin Sophie and create like a sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs bodysuit that I can put the new cat in, and then he can pad around, respected what the old cat was like. And I can go, look, see, they respected what Sophie was like. They're not going off doing all this newfangled, being a new cat with different patterns and a different sort of personality. Indeed. And my mum said, no, we'll get a new cat and you'll stop being weird.
Yeah.
Which I think was unfair. Because Sophie's dead!